Good morning. Welcome to the officer personnel session. Unfortunately, General Jones will not be here this morning. He's dealing with media at the Pentagon. He had to leave yesterday, and they're working some issues about that story that you're probably all aware about, perception of arms lowering standards. So he's getting spun up on that. He will be here this afternoon during the Keith Ware presentations. He should arrive. So for those Colonel's lunch, he will be here for that session. And today we have Major Brad Hayes. He is the Human Resources Assignment Manager for Colonels, and Lieutenant Colonel Don Corpy, who's from Human Resources Command as the Officer Assignment Manager. They're going to go through their briefs. Each one has about 6 slides. What we want to do is get this information out to you, and then we'll roll into Q&As for the rest of the hour. If we start going into questions as they go through the slides, we'll probably never get into this presentation. We do anticipate a lot of questions. So we'll start off with Lieutenant Colonel Corpy to do his brief, and then followed by Brad Hayes.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everybody today? All right, I like that. Good morning. My name is Don Corpy. As you just heard, I'm the branch manager at HRC. And first, on behalf, I apologize to everybody if I have not been responsive enough to your emails, phone calls, communications. Seriously, if you don't hear from me in about 48 hours, please follow up with a phone call or an email, because that's realistic. I owe you that to the field. And there are times I can't do that because TDY or other things going on. But that is, so for me, that is my goal always. Within 48 hours, at least reach back through some communication means to the field when someone reaches out to me. So we're going to go over some slides real quick. Next slide, please. We'll do a branch overview. This is an important slide, okay? When we get to this slide, it's going to have some details on it, and hopefully it's going to frame a realistic picture on where we are as a branch for you, so you have some realistic expectations of where you want to go and where you want to be in your timeline. Selection board and trends. We're going to save the questions to the end, which is great because I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that. Current PAO career path. NCOERs, OERs. We're going to talk about that a little bit because there is some misconceptions out there, frankly, on what is a good OER and what is not a good OER, because I get lots of phone calls and emails, and it's not bad. People think they're, got the best file since Moses parted the Red Sea, and they were the one that told Moses to close it, and then I look at their file, and it's simply not the case. So we owe you that to the field. Hey, when someone's counseling you, this is what a good OER looks like, and all of us can't be top 1% all the time, right? Because there's 99% of the rest of the Army. But you should know what you're looking for. So we're going to go over that real quick. And then at the end, we'll have discussion and questions. So with that, we're going to go to the branch overview. All right. So we have the current strength. I talked to the 06s about this yesterday. If you look over to our on hand, it's 103%. Today it's probably 101, 102 because we had a couple people with retirement dates that were November. So why is that important? Well, minus the captains, which you see, it starts at 89%. Those numbers over there, they are the starting point for what HRC can fill, okay? We are currently only manned approximately at 100% any given time. This is much lower than the other branches. Some of the combat arms branches are manned at almost 200% all the time. Most branches are manned between 130 and 140. Us being manned about 100% means when you look at this next column going across, there is no room for the officers who are pending separation, the officers who are in school, the officers selected for ACS, the officers selected for TWI, the officers in the VTIP program. All those officers are in that 100%, which is, like I said, on the slide it's 103 when I pulled this slide, but it's like 102 now. So at any given time, we have about 70 to 80 officers out of our population who are non-available. So when you call me and you say, I want to go to AFN Dallas because my grandmother lives there and, I love the Spurs. Hey, no, seriously, that's great. But when I tell you you're not going there, and then you say, no, really, Don, come on, I really want to go there. Well, yep, you're really not going there. And that's why, because we have to make, as HRC, tough decisions on if we're not going to fill at any given time 70 to 80 billets, we got to make those tough decisions on what's right for the Army over what's right for the officer. So when it's right for the Army and right for the officer, we try to put those numbers together. But that, frankly, it's just not always the case. So I just want to be upfront. So once you understand that, and then you come over to your individual, if you look at our captains, we're going to talk about VTIP a little bit at the end, but our captain strength is the lowest. Really, our captain strength in the field is about 70% at any given time. And that is because once somebody VTIPs over, they sign the memo and says, hey, thanks to John Smith or Jane Jones, I wanted to become a public affairs officer. As soon as they sign that memo, they count on our books. Do we have that officer right then? Does anyone know? No, right? We don't have that officer. It could be up to 18 months, folks. Okay, it could be as quick as 3 to 6 months. Could be up to 18 months. So I just tell you that so you understand what our starting point is. Okay, going down, our population management down here, what this tells us, if you come down here, expired YMAV. YMAV is year month availability to move. You should know what that is. So when you're talking to me and you say, I think I'm moving in January 18, and I say, I think you're moving in June 18, the reason for that is because I'm looking at your YMAV. If it's a DROS or a YMAV mismatch, we can talk about that, and there's reasons that happens. Okay, and I can adjust that, but I have to adjust it with justification. I have to have a reason to adjust it. So other thing on YMAV, time on station, see, it doesn't have time on station there, but that drives your YMAV as well. If you have more than 5 years time on station, short of you telling me, you know, your partner's on hospice and there's nowhere else in God's green country you can go, I'm going to look to move you, okay, because that's HRC policy. So if you have 3 years time on station and you want to stay somewhere, regardless, let's say you're at Bragg, I have a lot more flexibility at JBLM, Hood, Bragg, those places, to keep somebody there to a 5-year mark by simply extending their YMAV, talking to the folks there, and moving them to another position on those installations. But it will not reset your clock, so you're going to have another 3 years there. So your YMAV is going to be adjusted about 24 months so that you'd be moving at 5 years. Does that kind of make sense? So that's what I look at there. Expired retirement separations. Right now with 0, we had about 3 of those until like a month and a half ago. And that simply means once someone gets an approved medical retirement or an approved regular voluntary retirement, if Don is approved for 1 November 2018, but then I get injured and I have to have some type of surgery, or I request to be extended because the unit is deployed and they're coming back 30 days later, that's all that is right there. And I can do that up to 90 days. Anything greater than 90 days, then we got to go talk to the folks down the hall and get it changed that way. So any questions on that stuff right there? If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Oh, remaining requirements, I apologize. If you look here, see how low these numbers are right now? And we got 103. See this big number right here? It's for me and Brad, 103. Currently, for 1802, I am down to 60-something movers. I had 87-something, around 87, 88 at the beginning of this cycle. I'm down to 64. So if you minus the 06s, right, you can see how many requirements I have. So that means 1/3 of the requirements I already have for the summer of next year are going to be vacant because I can't fill them, right? Everyone can see it. I can't. If I only have 64 people to move and I have to fill, what, 91 slots as of right now? If you minus the 12 colonels, right? 92, whatever it is. You know, there's a big delta. And that big delta means there's a lot of people in this room and back on the installations are going to say, hey, Don, I put these as my top 5, but you're sending me to number 8. Well, yes, and I understand that, but of your top 5, when all is shaked out, we're only filling 2 of those positions that you put, your top 5. And that's a lot of discussion with General Jones. There's a lot of discussion with the HRC team up there. And we have an over-under chart. And the over-under chart just tells us as HRC that if you're in, let's just say if you're in 25th Infantry Division, you're in 82nd Infantry Division, you're in the 101st, that over-under is going to say, Corpy, for those units, you're going to fill them at 80%. So that's the over-under. So the under are going to be listed what units aren't going to get filled from an HRC perspective. Does that mean that those are the units the installation's not going to fill? There's a difference in that statement. So when HRC right now says we're not filling the cabs in the divisions because cabs deploy under task forces and under other folks, right? So we don't cut an order, as an example, to fill the aviation brigade in the 82nd as an example, that doesn't mean the 82nd, when we send an officer to 1st Brigade, doesn't say, hey, we're sliding Jones over to the cab, and the officer that just signed in, we're going to put, in the 1st, because that happens all the time, right? But just so you know, that's what all that means to us. Next slide. Okay, promotion board rates. Everybody wants, we get a lot of questions about this. I try to have as much truth in lending with individuals as I possibly can when I talk to folks, okay? If you look at us compared to other branches and across the Army and OSD's Operations Support Division, you'll see that our numbers, are pretty consistent for us. They fluctuate a little bit, but you'll see at 37.5, you go back another year in our primary, 31%, 33%, and then if you go back further, all the way to 13, at one time it was 50%. If you compare that to the rest of the Army, generally, we do okay. There are years that we don't do as well as the Army as a whole. And when we have such a small population, it's just common sense, folks, right? If you have a large percentage-wise of folks get promoted this year, the likelihood, unless we're expanding the Army, which we're doing right now, right? 17,000 more officers, right? The likelihood of next year, the percentage being slightly lower, is pretty good, right? And the opposite is true, too. The more officers we have retire, the lower the selection rate the year before, we would hope that that would drive a higher selection rate for the upcoming year, right? It kind of makes sense there. The key to all this is pretty simple. If you are 4 for 5, and I just believe in having an upfront conversation, if you're a 4 for 5 on your OERs of your last 5 as a lieutenant colonel, or 4 for 6, the odds of you getting promoted to 06 are pretty high statistically. I think we've only had 2 people not selected, and that's because they had something, something else, If you are 3 for 5 or 3 for 6, depending on how your file cuts when they do your measure of performance score, okay, it will base on a lot of other factors. Only some of those folks are getting selected for 06. So if there's, like last year's board, there's a whole bunch of people who are 3 for 5, right, and only 1 or 2 are going to get selected for 06, well, that's when those other things really matter. That's when those key jobs matter. That's when those broadening assignments matter. That's when those things matter. But on face value, if you are a higher percentage, if you're 4 for 5, you're going to get selected, regardless of what jobs you had, regardless of whether it was a KD job or not. That's not Don saying that. That's what the numbers and that's what the boards consistently come back and say. For a major to lieutenant colonel, if you are 3 for 5 with no DROG, you will get promoted. Unless the Army dramatically changes these numbers, as far as selection rates, you're going to get promoted. If you are 2 for 5, minus some other considerations, you have about a 50% chance of getting promoted. That's just truth in lending. So keep that in mind. So be honest and have those conversations with your rater and senior raters when it comes time to discuss those things. If you're 1 for 5 on your OERs and your board is coming up, if you get another highly qualified, the odds of you getting selected are not that high. So, and above zone, what it takes to get promoted in the primary zone is not the same as what it takes in the above zone. If you are 2 for 5 in the primary zone, you have a chance, right, of getting promoted. If you're 2 for 5 in the above zone, it is highly unlikely you will get selected, statistically. Once again, I don't have any say in it. I just look at all the numbers collectively. So just stuff to keep in mind. Go ahead. I don't want to take Brad's time. I'm going too slow. Next slide. All right. Current career field. I field lots of questions about this. So I just want to, in front of everybody right here, take it back to your installations, take it back to your friends, your enemies, or whatever you may have. If you are a captain and a major, you should do two brigade-type PAO jobs. Okay? I don't know what people are thinking out there. Email me, call me all the time talking about, I have already done, I was in an MPAD, so I'm not going back to a brigade. Oh, okay, really? Well, no, you're going back to a brigade. Okay, I was in the 82nd Aviation. That was my first job, and now I've been in school, and now I've been selected for TWI, and I have a utilization. And if I don't have a deputy position available for you, you might go back to that type of job. Okay? The reason is pretty simple. When General Jones and General Frost before him talks to the field, one of the biggest complaints they have out there, and you can talk to the 06s that are around because they hear it too, one of the biggest complaints is we don't give the brigade commanders experienced PAOs. We give them right out of the schoolhouse, or we give them all officers that don't have the most desirable files. So it's going to happen. If it happens to you, it's not a bad thing. Okay? It's going to happen to lots of folks. TWI, ACS is up here. We have to, as a branch, we're going to have to make some adjustments on how we're doing ACS and TWI timeline-wise. Okay? It's hurting our branch. When we're sending senior majors to ACS and senior majors to TWI, that does nothing for our career field. It's great for the individual officer, and I'm not saying that officer doesn't have talents and skills they take with them. What I'm saying, it doesn't give us a lot of time to the utilization of that officer. We have officers who graduate those programs and then are retiring 2.5 years after they graduate those programs. Lots of them, actually. You know, we have officers that only do one assignment after those programs. So we have officers who have done those programs who are 2-time non-selects at the next rank. That's just truth in lending. So how does that happen? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. That happens because, truth in lending, we don't have enough people apply to those programs. There's great people doing those programs, absolutely. Right? Great people, and I want people to take advantage of those programs. But when we have to fill 8 positions and we only have 10 people apply, that make, well, 8 of those 10 people are going to get selected, right? Now, all those people are great Americans and they're great PAOs, but that doesn't give a lot of room for the selection process, right? So we need to encourage our young officers, I use that word lightly, right? Our younger career timeline officers to apply to those programs. So we can have 30 people applying to that program, and then we're selecting 5 out of 30. Because then we know we're selecting the right officers on the right timeline in those programs. So I encourage more people to apply. And if you are later in that timeline as a major, I'm not telling you not to apply. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as a collective view, we got to get people earlier in their career applying for those programs, and we got to improve the percentage of people applying. And frankly, we need more top file folks applying. Only about 1/3 of people applying to those programs are top files. Top files meaning the top 1/3 statistically of our branch. So, okay, next slide. All right. This is on the AIMS now, right? Everyone saw that tab that has measure of performance on the AIMS 2 system if you've logged in there. Okay, we'll take questions about this at the end, but what does it mean? Measure of performance is a calculated score by HRC of your file. Okay? You will not get that number, but I want you to know what it is. Okay? How they come up with it. Okay? It's not a complete evaluation. It uses certain data points to come up with a score, and then it has everybody in your year group and everybody in your branch literally with a score next to it. Okay? That is a huge factor when we look at files. Okay, I'll just be honest with you. It's a weighted average, okay? It's not the same as the previous ACM and center mass view because it looks at a lot more than block checks, right? It used to be, like we just opened up this conversation, it's just block checks, right? If you were 50% or more, you were considered doing well, right? You had those heartbeats, you were doing well. That was the old system. It's just a snapshot in time, okay? Previous OERs are not to be used in the field for officer nominative assignments. Let me ask you something. How many people in here have been asked in signing into their jobs to provide copies of the OERs? Team, is that allowed? HRC will say no. No. It's inappropriate. Period. What that does, it prejudges officers good or bad, right? So when I get those phone calls that say, I'm not taking this officer because we look, this, my first thing I always say is, well, first of all, why is your G1 pulling OERs on an officer? Because that's a no-go. A second question is, why are you asking that officer for their OERs? You absolutely, you can look at ORBs all day long. All day long, look at ORBs. Absolutely, that's their purpose. Okay. Now, nominative HRC and nominative positions, right? Official nominative positions. There's a lot of non-official nominative positions out there. Okay. Any questions? Well, no questions in that. Okay. It's up to you ultimately, though. You can authorize your chain of command to view them. Okay. In general, FA and PA MOP scores are slightly lower than combat arms. Okay. Our average MOP score is somewhere around 4, just so you know. That's slightly lower than combat arms, but it makes sense if you think about it, because we're primarily what? Staff officers, right? Especially at the captain and major level. That's our primary. Words matter a whole lot. A whole lot. Block check of MQ and strong wording equals a top OER or NCOER. Okay? No enumeration or vague wording brings the overall evaluation to a lower score. Okay? If you get an MQ and it says, Don's one of the best PAOs I ever worked with in my 30 years career, that is a weak write-up. I'm just telling you, that's a weak write-up. Because it's non-quantifiable, right? The board can't say, well, what does he mean by that? What does she mean by that? Okay? Maybe I've only worked with one PAO in my 30-year career. Maybe I've worked with 100, right? It's vague. It's fluff. It's the type of word that people use when they don't have the moral courage to put what they should put on an OER. And I see hundreds of them. So that's just truth in lending. You want your OERs to be very specific and say, this officer is a top 1% officer. This officer is a top 5%. This officer is a top 20% officer. If someone wants to put on your OER, you are less than anything than 40%, ask them, please don't put it. Because less than 40% doesn't really mean 40%. Everybody tracking what I'm saying? Because if you get anything less than 40%, you're not like the 60% of the Army. You're like the bottom 10% of the Army on your eval. Truth in lending, right? Okay?
Don, can I ask one quick question about that? So the numerical enumeration is better than percentages, even though they're the same. It's better for an officer
Much better, sir.
to say top 3 of 12 than top 25%, even though mathematically they're exactly.
Yes, sir. Absolutely true. And if you have both, that's great. If you have both, because lots of times, sir, that's a good point. Lots of times what you'll see is, hey, Don is number 2 of the 6 lieutenant colonels I currently senior rate, right? So 2 of 6 is not bad, right? That's pretty good. So, but then you'll see Don is a 5% officer of all the officers, right, that I rate. See, that's great, because obviously 2 out of 6 isn't top 5%, right? The math doesn't work out. But you can do that because there's no cost to it, right? So they're absolutely right. That's how that works right there. If you get anything that's below 50%, it's a referred OER from HRC's perspective. So your block check doesn't have to be referred on your OER. If it says that you're less than a 50% officer, it's considered a referred OER for HRC.
We generally have pretty small profiles, so I don't know any 06 who's rated 2 of 6 lieutenant colonels. So I mean, I think we're hampered sometimes by our.
Right.
I rate 1 lieutenant colonel.
And that's what you need to say.
1 of 1. Is that what I'm supposed to say?
No. Yeah. So in a case like that, no, that's a great point. In a case like that, words really matter in a case like that. So you want to put that officer, if you want to take care of an officer and you truly want to take care of that officer should be a top 20% or better officer. So that's what you want to put in there. Jane is in the top 5% of the 30 lieutenant colonel PAOs I've rated in my career. If you're only rating 1. As an example, words matter. So if you have a poor word, even with a top block, it's going to bring it down a whole number. A whole number. Well, the opposite is true too. If you have a highly qualified, and don't let this secret out. Everybody in this room minus 2 people in our whole career field have a center mass OER somewhere. There's only 2 people in our entire career field that don't have a center mass OER somewhere, okay? All right? So that's okay. That's okay. What you can't have is consecutive. That's where, remember I was talking about the cutoff lines being 3 for 5 and 2 for 5 sometimes, right? That's when that really matters. Okay, if you're a major going to lieutenant colonel, and there's only 2 more people that are going to select for our numbers for our branch, and there's another 40 people that are 2 for 5, well, I'll tell you right now, it matters that your 2 were the last bottom of your stack and the last 3 in a row were center mass versus, you know, Mrs. Hodges, who bottom 3 were center mass, but the top 2 are above center mass, or MQ as we call them now. Does that make sense to everybody? So once you stack more than 2, you're going to be in jeopardy to get promoted. 2 is okay, but if you stack more than 2 in a row, regardless of the rest of your file, you're going to be in jeopardy to get promoted. So that's just truth in lending again. Okay, next one. All right, last slide I think, which is, and I apologize, but is the VTIP. There's a lot of confusion about VTIP and CSL, so we're going to touch on that real quick. Okay, CSL has only been around now, this is the 5th year, I believe, for CSL, and we have mixed results, frankly. And HRC is based on that. We do analysis. I just did the analysis for FY19, so they're not out yet, obviously, but we just did the analysis for that board. And FA46 has one of the lowest board scores for CSL. Now, on face value, right, we could think that's bad, right? We could say, oh, well, why would we have one of the lowest board scores? Well, it's simple. We have one of the highest selection rates. Because the number of our positions versus our population size, there's not another career field. We are top. So you should feel good. You should feel good about that. Of all the branches, we are top. Meaning, because our division PAO jobs are CSL jobs, right, we have a very small lieutenant colonel population. It fluctuates between 70 and 75 generally, right? Okay, well, do the math, folks. If we have 7 and 5, that's 12. So that means 12 of 72 people are going to get selected for CSL. Compare that to infantry that has like a 3 or 4% selection rate per year for that. So that's why, of course, our score numbers are going to be lower because we're going much further down percentage-wise our list than other branches. So, okay. Must leave CSL with at least 1 MQ. It's that simple. Don't let anyone tell you something different. If you're in a CSL billet, you have to leave with at least a 1 above center mass. Or else you'll be like Corpy in a non-select. Okay. So 1/3 of 46 CSL positions are filled by alternates. 1/3. And that has been consistent. There's been some years where it's been 2/3 for that individual year. The people have been alternates going into position. So why is that important? It's important for 2 reasons. One, if you put you're going to compete, commit to competing. So when that list comes out, you don't, you know, if you defer and it's for one of the 3 official reasons, you're okay. But if you choose not to accept the CSL assignment, once you said you're going to compete, that's with prejudice, and that's going to affect you later. 1, you won't be considered again. 2, it's going to affect you because the next board's going to see that. So keep that in mind. VTIP. Our current selection process is captains, KDs, not a promotion risk, self-application. I appreciate people giving others my name and contact information, and please do for the VTIP program. But don't give my name and contact information for people to have unrealistic expectations, okay? We need to recruit quality folks. When people call me who are 0 for 7, and it happens, they're 0 for 7 on their evaluations, and they want to come over to PAO, and I tell them, well, you can submit a VTIP packet, but I don't want to waste your time, so I don't recommend you do it. And people's feelings get hurt. You know? We need quality folks, okay? I want you to actively recruit, but I want you to actively recruit quality folks who are going to do well in this career field, not people trying to escape their basic branch. So, second thing, only about 20% of applicants the last couple of years were top files. This last board, I had 29 applicants, just truth and lending, I had 29 applicants this last board, and only 6 of the 29 were top file, what HRC considers a top file. Again, HRC's top file is based on that percentage-wise, based on their year group and their rank. So we need to improve that number. So we talked about that. You guys and girls out there are the ones that are going to bring people over to the career field. We have to bring about 20 people a year for the next 5 years to make up the gap on those first slides that showed our end strength, just to keep us at 100%. And right now, we're only bringing about 6 to 8 people over a year. So This year we're going to do a lot better, I think, because this last VTIP board, the results aren't out yet, but we fared pretty well, much better than we had the previous 3 years. Okay, senior PAOs on installations, I know General Jones has pushed that as well, and I know a lot of them, guys and girls, have called and talked to me about it, and they've done a great job this year out there getting the word out. We need to continue to push that. Background education can be used by HRC G1s. All right, if you go to TopMIS, all that is scrubbable. You can do a master query, right? You can scrub all that data. So if you're at Fort Bragg, if you're at JBLM, you're at Hood, you're in Hawaii at Schofield, you're G1, you can go to your G1 and say, hey, can you tell me how many folks in my population have communication degrees? Hey, can you tell me how many folks in my population have attended this particular school or have this type of assignment? They can scrub all that data. And that'll give you, just like it gives us at HRC, a potential list of folks to go talk to, right? Okay, once again, don't ask for their OERs, right? Okay, we just want to make that clear. Okay. Here's where we're moving forward. Expanding PA and window to newer year groups and closing the senior will allow a longer time in career field. That goes back to what we talked about before. Right now, the only way we get public affairs officers is through the VTIP program, right? So right now, it does very little good for our career field when we pull somebody over who is a year group right now, 2000 or 99, right, or 2001, that window, okay? We need to pull folks over much, much earlier because we have to get enough utilization out of those individuals. Because if we pull somebody over and they're only going to be in our career field for 4 or 5 years, our return on investment is not that good, okay? So we may only get 2 assignments out of that individual. All right, next slide. All right, last thing I want to discuss that I don't have a slide for is if you are in a position, okay, where you think you're going somewhere that you don't want to go, okay, and you've talked to me and there's nothing we can do about it and change it, okay, keep in mind, you, not me, okay, you raised your right hand and said, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You did that on your own, okay? We will work with you as much as we can, and I do everything I can to keep families together and get a person someplace they want to go. But at the end of the day, listen, we have to fill 11 slots a year in career. We're filling those slots. I'm telling you. Every year we got about 7 YS taskings for majors and lieutenant colonels, and guess what? Somebody's filling those slots. Okay? Every year we're sending folks, okay, to Afghanistan. Every year we're sending folks to Inherent Resolve, to Resolute Support. We're going to continue doing those things. So, this is what I would tell you. Do not have the attitude, it's not me, because everybody in this room has a legitimate family situation. Everybody in this room has a legitimate son or daughter in high school or going into high school. Everyone in this room has some type of medical situation with their spouse, family, loved one, parent. All those things are considerations, and if we can do things that make sense for the Army without penalizing the other officers around you, we will do it. But I'm not going to hurt other officers around you so you can stay somewhere at Camp Smith while you're high school junior so you can be there for the junior senior year when you haven't deployed in 10 years and the 3 other officers around you have deployed 3 times, and if I leave you there, none of that officer next to you is going to deploy again. I'm not going to do it. So I just want you to have a clear picture of the way I think. So I will work with anybody, but most people are good to go and it's not an issue. But there are some people I deal with that it shocks me the level of selfishness and non-professionalism on how they view their career. And the Army should work with you, but you should work with the Army as well. And I'm not trying to be negative, but I just want to throw that out there. God bless you, which is my personal opinion, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for talking, everybody. I hate to throw another question because I know Brad wants to talk to folks. Can you talk about SVABs? Just because I got a lot of officers who are asking me questions about X assignments and how the Army views SVABs and...
Sure. The SFAB right now is the number 2 priority in the Army. Number 2, above all. So the SFAB, they are trying to make this program different than the previous MIT teams, right? Anyone deal with MIT teams in the past? training brigades, those type of things. Because in the past, what has happened is Major Smith goes to a MIT team and then becomes Lieutenant Colonel Smith, and he commands a MIT team or some other type of small training package, right? And then it comes for battalion command and for selection to the next rank. And they say, oh, well, that counted as command time, or, oh, well, you already did that type of job over here. And those folks have not done well competing-wise in the past. So there's a lot of pushback from the field when we start talking SFAB, because people have that memory and people have that understanding and seen it happen to themselves or their peers, right? Okay, the SFAB right now, we've been directed that we can send no greater than 50% bottom files to the SFAB. Bottom file sounds terrible, right? But no, it means 50% of the officers we send have to be at least above a 50% center mass to above center mass or MQ to HQ file to the SFABs. One, so that makes it much more competitive. One, okay? Second thing, it's considered a KD position for public affairs, guys, okay? So SFAB will count as a KD position, okay? So that's a very good thing.
What are they getting, a major?
Majors right now, okay?
So another brigade PO job is how.
Yes. So, one, you'll be competing against quality other officers, which is good for you, even though some people may not think it is good for you, okay? Two, you're going to get KD'd. And the third part of that is, as being the Chief of Staff's #1 priority, you will get a lot of consideration on your follow-on assignment for those who volunteer for that program. So, and people are going to it, regardless, you know.
They will get the additional skill qualifier, the CR9?
They will, sir. I don't think that's been finalized, but that's, I haven't seen the final thing, but it's where it's leading to. If it hasn't been finalized, it should be shortly. Okay, thank you again for your time, sir.
Cool. Drink water. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brad Hayes. I am the Colonel's Human Resource Manager for a couple of branches, so Air Defense, Info Ops, Space Ops, and Public Affairs. So I represent all four branches on behalf of the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So this is what we do. So one key note up front that folks don't often know, and it's good to see a lot of folks that I talk to on the phone, and thanks for ACPA and General Jones for inviting me to come do this morning. It's great to see everyone. One of the things up front is that there's a clear delineation between us and HRC. So we are not located at Fort Knox. We are not officially a part of HRC. We are part of the Chief of Staff of the Army's office. We work for the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So our office is located in Crystal City, Virginia, HRC, Fort Knox, Kentucky. So even though we do a lot of things with HRC, once you become the rank of colonel, or Lieutenant Colonel promotable, you leave that population. We do a deliberate handover, and you become part of my population. So just want to make sure everybody knows HRC Fort Knox, SLD Colonel's Management Office right here in the NCR. Next slide. So what I want to do today is really the purpose is to provide you kind of an overview brief of what we do for Colonel's Management. So, I know when I got called on the phone, I was deployed as a Brigade 3, and they said, hey, you're going to SLD. I'd never even heard of that acronym before in my life. What is SLD? What is COMO? But SLD, it stands for Senior Leader Development, okay? So when you hear SLD, just think about there's two divisions in that. So there's General Officer Management, which is the Chief of Staff of the Army, and then there's Colonel's Officer Management, which is run by the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So we like to kind of joke and say that the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army is really all Colonel's assignments officers, because that's actually correct. So I'm going to start from the top, work my way down, and then I'm going to finish over here on the left-hand side. So again, once you become promotable, one of our things we like to say to the war colleges, our bosses lead off, hey, congratulations, you're awesome. You've made Lieutenant Colonel promotable, you're going to be a Colonel, and now you have the opportunity to serve up to 30 years, particularly for the functional areas. So the way that we're divided is we have a couple of sections. I'm kind of the hybrid of the human resource managers, since I have both the ops category, ops support category, and then the new information dominance category with info ops. So this is the way that we're arranged. A couple of folks. So when you call me, like I said, I represent you plus air defense and space ops and info ops. up here at the top, so there are approximately 3,000 colonels positions, and there's about 3,500 colonels at any given year. So why do you think we have more colonels than we do positions? What happens at this stage in sort of the career path when you make colonel and you kind of get to the end of that glide path? What starts to happen? People start to retire. So when we do promotions, we do forecasting out, we look at those folks who are going to retire. So you often have folks, so what we do is we start to look at someone that's going to stay towards the full 30 years. We're not trying to backfill that person at the 30-year mark. We're looking at the 29 and a half year mark. That way we can provide the command a proper backfill. All right, starting on the left. So another difference between us and HRC is that we have one assignment cycle per year. It sounds easy, right? But at Colonel's Management, and I know HRC does too, we have a lot of general officer inputs. A lot, okay? Every colonel works for general officer. So not only do I deal and engage with General Jones, but I deal with SMDC CGs, the Corps DCGs, the fire CGs. So we get a lot of inputs from a lot of senior leaders because they really, really care about where you're going to go. So the way we do this is we have one assignment cycle, so working from the bottom. So we have, what we do is we base everything off of requirements. So we've just completed that stage, figuring out what positions are going to be open, who are going to be our movers, and that's part of the process on that. And then what we actually do is we go into working groups. So as a human resource manager for colonels, I am your advocate. So, and hopefully when I've spoke to folks on the phone, you've gotten that feeling that I'm your advocate, your trusted advocate. So not necessarily I don't guarantee anything, but you definitely have a part in the process to tell me what you want, and it's my job to make sure we can support you in achieving that. So something interesting, I'll cover this on the next slide, but something interesting about colonels' assignments is that it's a very deliberate, sometimes time-consuming process. So I know as majors and captains, you know, we're always sort of getting our RFOs late and we're wondering why. We try to be very deliberate on getting RFOs out, but just keep in mind that there is a very, very deliberate process involved. So there's a couple of votes that go in play. So I work with the officer to figure out what he or she would like to do. I work with the proponent, in this case General Jones, to figure out who's the best match for a position. We work with the losing command to get their vote to say, yes, this is where Colonel so-and-so needs to go. But most importantly, my job with General Jones is to make sure that when we nominate a colonel to a gaining command, it's the right fit. Because that gaining command also has a vote on who is accepted. So we like to say that every colonel's assignment is a nominative assignment because it really is. So you're nominated each of the commands, and then before we take anything to the vice, I've gone through those stages. I've talked to the officer, I've discussed with General Jones, discussed with the losing command, gaining command concurrence, and now we're ready to take to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So every single colonel's assignment gets briefed to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. We go in there, periods like this, it's not that busy, but sometimes there will be 75, 80 colonels that we will go in and brief. And he takes a very deliberate interest in each one of these. So we have to explain why each of these nominations are the right fit for the overall good of the Army or the Joint Service. Next slide. All right, kind of touched on a lot of this already, but we work directly for the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. The Vice is the approval authority, validates, and again, there's a process. So we nominate, and then the Vice approves. Nominate, and then the Vice approves. And then once the Vice approves the validation, says that you're going to go to such and such assignment, then we can cut your RFO. But we cannot cut the RFO until all of those things have occurred. Next slide. Again, operate one assignment cycle a year. So there's a little less, I think, hard and fast is probably what HRC works with, again, because we give a lot of senior leader inputs. So we always tell folks in the same general line that assignments are anywhere from 2 to 3 years. There are exceptions. With functional areas, because of the inventory of colonels is less than it is on the combat arms side, we pretty much know that you're going to go to a 46th coded position. But it's not uncommon, I manage air defense officers, that someone could go to assignment for 1 year and then move up to another assignment because the senior leader wants him or her to go somewhere. So yes, all assignments are typically 2 to 3 years, but sometimes that duration can vary. For the most part, with public affairs, from what I've seen for colonels, assignments are going to be at least 2 years, and oftentimes they're going to be greater than that, just based on the inventory of colonels that we have and trying to meet our demands that we have. This is also true with the other functional areas where you have more demand for colonels than you do inventory. I deal with this with IO as well, where we work with HRC counterparts, and this is where I work with the proponents, to where we may have to fill 06 billets with lieutenant colonels. What we try to do is we try to look into those folks who have potential, probable future senior service college graduates coming in to fill those slots. Bottom line, I think Colonel Corpy mentioned this as well, we have to meet, just like HRC, meet Army requirements. So when I call you up or we provide you the list of assignments that are out there, these are valid, again, I'm using this word, valid Army and joint requirements. At the same time, at the level of where we're at for lieutenant colonel promotables and colonels, we're also trying to make sure that it's the best fit for that command and also for that officer. Because especially at the lieutenant colonel promotable level, you still have a number of years to go. We want to make sure we can broaden you into whatever that career path is. So from going out of the War College and then all the way up to a COCOM level PAO. Then I mentioned this, so RFOs are not a quick process. I don't think they are at HRC either, but for us they're really not. Because again, sometimes it's kind of hard to say, hey, you can't say to a 3 or 4 star command, hey, we're on this timeline. Sometimes it will happen, but sometimes it won't. But we have to wait for those processes to occur. Again, losing command gets a vote, gaining command gets a vote, the vice approves, and then after that happens, we can cut the RFO for colonels. Next slide. So I just wanted to provide this up front. Again, a little bit different probably than what some folks are accustomed for HRC. There are really, at least for public affairs, a little different for air defense, but for public affairs, there's really 7 major events that happen throughout the year. So really what I do, and hopefully the colonels in the population will say, yes, this is correct for the most part. But around early August, what I'll do is I'll start reaching out to folks and say, hey, we're looking at you. You've been identified as a 2018 mover. So that's sort of step 1 is notifying you that you're looking to move. Step 2 is that's with the current population. Step 2, the list was a little delayed this year. Then step 2 is we wait for the colonel's list to come out. So colonel's list is released. We have a new crop of lieutenant colonel promotables. I also inform them if they haven't just PCS, hey, you're also going to move if you've been inside of an 05 billet. There are certain exceptions, but for the most part, we do try to move folks who are in 05 billets up to an 06 billet. Step 3, which is kind of what's occurring right now, is I've shot out the open position list to the colonels' populations, asked for preferences, sort of your top 2 or 3 on where you would like to go. Again, no guarantees, but at this level, and I think with any assignment, it often helps that if you want to go to assignment, that's part of the process is going to there. So I'll take those, I'll build that, and then what we'll do is we'll develop a tentative slate for General Jones. We'll work through that, and then we'll put that together. That list really can't be completed until this one occurs, the SSC board results. So step number 4 is really the mark on the wall where we can kind of go past LD and move on to where we can go on. So at that point, the list will be released. We'll publish that. So you'll either go to senior service college or you'll be eligible for assignment. Then we'll get into around late January timeframe, and that's where I should have a good idea of where colonels are going to go. So at this point, I've notified you. I've provided you some options on where you can go. Ask for your feedback. Senior service college list has been released. And now at this point, we've kind of gone through the process, and now I'm letting you know where you're going to go. This does not mean RFO. Again, please, not RFO. None of the major 3 steps have occurred. So I get your feedback, and you're like, yes, this is good, or no, it's not good. Most time it's good to go. And then once I get the feedback and I go back to General Jones, we work through it again, and that's when that whole process works. So contact your losing command, they say thumbs up. Contact the gaining command, they say thumbs up. then we take it to the vice. So the goal is to really to have the RFOs, and it's a little easier for functional areas, have the RFOs release no later than the April timeframe, with you expected to move in June, July timeframe. So I think that's pretty good, at least 90 days out, sometimes sooner. But again, your engagement with me, particularly for the colonels population, is good. That way we can make sure we get your preferences locked in. Next slide. This is my final slide, just some key takeaways. Again, just the losing command, gaining command have a vote. We're much like HRC. A lot of the career things are the same. One thing I'd advise you to do is just to communicate with your assignment officer, your human resource manager, and there are certain things that are on you on us as individuals to keep up to date. MACP, EFMPs, those things are incumbent upon the officer to do those things. That way we can assign you properly. Trusted agent. So again, I'm kind of like for colonels. For all the 4 branches. I'm your sports agent. I'm your advocate. If you tell me that something needs to stay between us, it stays between us. If it's something that needs to be shared, I'd ask you to let me know that too, because senior leaders are making informed decisions on basically what I'm providing them for where you go. So this is where we may be a little different. File assessment's important, but for functional areas, particularly for public affairs and IO, there are no hard billets for general officer, right? So your file assessment up to a point has taken you up to the level of lieutenant colonel, promotable, and colonel. So there's one factor that is probably just as important as file assessment once you reach the rank of colonel. And what do you think that is? When you're dealing with senior leaders on your next assignment, so there's file assessment, and there's one other thing. Can anybody guess what that is? Reputation. Thank you, sir. And I promise I didn't can that. Reputation. So it's a small community, right? So most everybody who have inside the functional areas have worked for a colonel at one point who is now probably a general officer. So yes, your reputation is a part of it as well. And then another point too is advocacy. So having someone who can advocate on your behalf, again, either to us or reaching out to General Jones or doing BNRs, those things happen because most of the time you're going to go work at a 3 or 4 star level. So yes, folks are going to be very picky about who they have as their public affairs officer. Again, communication. We use something a little different. Colonels are familiar with it. It's called the Developmental Opportunity Module. It's basically a website you go to. It's got a list of positions. It's by no means perfect, but colonels can log on to there and see what's available for positions. They can also select it, but I try to get ahead of it a little bit by sending out the positions ahead of time. Not a whole lot of opportunities, but if you ever have the opportunity to serve on a board, I'd recommend you serve at a board, not just at a colonel's level, but lieutenant colonel, major's level. Just something that also probably makes you a better officer on how, we talked about the discussion of rating, so just be open to that. I'd like to mention joint. I'm sure we're going to get questions, so I'll try to be brief. I'd like to mention joint. So joint qualification is important in really 3 areas. Okay, number 1, you have to be joint qualified to be a general officer. There are some jobs you have to be joint qualified. I think we only have one in the colonel's realm, which is called a joint critical billet, where you have to be joint qualified before you can do it. Some of those are like NDU faculty, National Defense University faculty. You have to be joint qualified. And really the other reason is you just want to be joint qualified. So unless you're going to be a general officer, unless you're going to a joint critical billet, want to be a faculty member, want to go to one of those other jobs, or you just want it, the joint qualification piece is not as important for functional area career fields as it is for combat arms or other branches. So hopefully that makes sense, but again, always willing to help people get joint qualified, and we can definitely do that, but again, just kind of 3 things to consider. And I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't go through that too fast, but it's kind of what I wanted to provide today. So. Well played. Thank you.
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to point out, for the folks in the lieutenant colonel population and the major population in public affairs, if you take a look at the numbers he showed on the board, above the zone promotion is a very real thing in our career field. So don't get down and don't trash yourself and don't toss your career out the window or start making decisions. If you want to hang around, work hard, because it's a possibility. If you look at our numbers quite often for SSC selection, for colonel, a good population, it's like the Army wants us to wait one more year to let us cook a little longer to figure out whether we're going to be okay or not. So it is still possible, you know, above the zone is still more possible almost, I think, than if you look at the numbers, than in a lot of the regular kind of combat arms type career fields. So keep that in mind. You know, as I've talked to the guys who work for me, you talk about above the zone population is still it's still a thing, and especially for our career field. So.
Yes, sir. One of the changes that HRC just recently made is if you are a two-time non-select and you get Select Con, which is Selected Continued Service, in which almost everyone has been offered this last year, you continue to compete. So if you were not a selectee in the primary zone, and let's just say you weren't selected in the above zone, if you continue selective service, you still compete. So if you think about that, that means if your file wasn't the strongest at the time you were non-select in the primary zone, if you think about that, you have 3 more chances to improve your file to be competitive. And you know, look at the difference that can make. I mean, that could be a huge difference. 3 years, it could be 4 OERs. I mean, you know, the difference would be huge. So yeah, absolutely concur.
Sir, Captain Daniel, 35th ADA in Korea. And as a 1802 mover, I'm definitely interested in everything you had to say, and especially AIM 2.0. I was hoping you'd go into some of the background on that, because I was explaining to my sister, and I was like racking, stacking, and I'm swiping right. She said it's kind of like Tinder. Maybe they swipe right. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going here.
Alrighty. You may need a younger generation person to add to that reference. Adios. Yeah.
Maybe you can
Yeah.
behind the scenes on what that means to people
Absolutely.
like me or any other 1802 mover.
Okay. There's 2 things unique about functional areas that are different than the other basic branches. One is we were the first folks to use AIMS. Okay, so when AIMS opened for us last month, the functional areas were the only people it was open to when it opened. I just closed it yesterday. If anyone was online recently, I left it open until yesterday. I closed it in my hotel room yesterday. Yeah, AIMS is the assignment. What's the I? Thank you. Interactive module. All right, AIMS, what it is, it wants to make a permanent record and take the guesswork and the unknown out of the assignment process. So what it tries to do is take individual officer preference with his reference, right? So it takes individual officer preference, the G1s, not Corpy, not HRC, the G1s for the unit builds the requirements. So when you log into AIMS and you see the 50 billets or you see 20 billets or whatever, based upon your rank in your year group, whatever positions you see, that means a G1 somewhere has went into TopMIS and said, I have a valid requirement. We have 2 cycles a year, like Brad was talking about. So either, in this case, 1801 or 1802, and said, I have a requirement in the summer of 18. So when they validate that, that creates what they call a REC, which is a requirement, and then it sends over to HRC account managers. The account manager looks at that and says, negative G1 in 3 Corps. You say you have a requirement, but you're actually overstrength 2 officers that you haven't accessed billets, so they vote no. Then it comes over to me, and I say, negative, okay? The account manager said negative, but I say negative because you have an 04 that you're not even serving in a 46 billet. So I'm not sending you somebody else when this person that you're not even using has a 46. So that's how something can be no, right? But that's not the norm. So the norm is the G1 says we have this requirement. The account manager says, yes, I agree. We have this requirement. And then it comes over to me, and I say, yep, I agree. There's a valid requirement for a person there. Now, does that mean 100% a person's going to go there? No, right? It's saying we agree that there's a requirement there. So all that is in there. So when we open Ames, all that happens before you can view it. So then we open Ames and we create a marketplace. A marketplace is by the requirement, pay grade, and pay grade authorization. So I see both. So the unit says, their MTO may say whatever, that this is a 05 billet, right? So if you're in 05, you're going to see that billet in your marketplace, okay? You may see it as an 04 if it's been filled with an 04, or I open it to 04s, because I may not have enough 05s to fill 05 requirements. So you'll see that. Well, the opposite is true too, and that's why it's a good discussion. Some people have called me and said, why do I see captain billets, right? Some majors can see captain billets because they're in there. Because I have more captain billets than I have captains, and percentage-wise, what rank do I have the most of? Majors, right? So a lot of people don't like that, and I will say it's more important the job you do. If you're in a brigade, whether it's slotted for a captain or a major, okay, it's more important the job you do there in that brigade than whether that position has been slotted for a captain or a major. You go there, do a great job, and that's what will determine your future. So you select your preferences, right? After you select your preferences, I close the window, which was yesterday. So now I can see you put your top 20 out of the 30 that were listed there, or if you put all 30, that's fine. Some people just did their top 5, some people did the whole thing, okay? So I can see that. Now, from yesterday until about the end of the second week of December, the units are going to go in there and say, hey, James selected our unit as number 4. So they look at James' orb, and they look at all those remarks where you put your resume, you put your education background, you put your hobbies, right? You put your experience. If you left all that blank, well then truly you don't want to go where you put you want to go. And I told a couple officers that. I actually called a couple officers and said, hey, this is completely blank. Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay. No, okay. It's completely blank. All right. Because you're trying to sell yourself to what you put your top picks, right? So the unit comes back and says thumbs up or thumbs down. They don't have the final say, okay? But that is an assignment consideration. The reason they did it like that is because they want to do away with these mass memos. They want to do away with that says, hey, I'm the CG for USARA, I'm the CG for Army South, I'm the CG for U.S. Special Forces Command, or wherever, putting 20 names on a memo and saying these are the 20 people I want. So they want to do away with that, because that is not the by name process, but a lot of people think it is, So the system is doing that for you, right? So if you're a G1 and you put, hey, I want Don Corpy wants to come here, it's his number 3 choice. So there's a slot open, you want to go there, the unit wants you, your odds of going there then are now greatly improved, right? So minus other things like EFMP, MACP, right? Other things, we're going to try to do that, right? So I will try to match somebody in that scenario. If you put number 1 and 2, but the unit said no to 1 and 2, but you said in your third one you'd want to go there and they would take you, when I talk to you in late December, January timeframe, which is probably when I will talk to all of you individually who are in that assignment cycle and say, hey, now that we got a base slate in, of the 10 places you put, here are the 2 or 3 that you can realistically go. Then I'm going to say, hey, your number 3 choice was the 82nd. They like you, they want to take you, you want to go there. Your number 1 and 2, neither one of those units voted yes. So I would, what do you think about the 82nd? And you could say, no, sir, I really didn't mean to put the 82nd. I don't want to go there, right? So that's how it works. So then after I do the assignment, okay, even before an RFO is cut, when I build it, it has to go through this process, and 2 weeks is I was impressed. 2 weeks is a good time because we have to do the EAC system, inbox system, and it goes through about 10 individuals before
Minimum 2 weeks.
Yeah, it goes, before I can actually release that RFO, it goes through all these checks and balances. So once I slate you to go to one of your preferences, right? Now, you'll be able to see in names that I matched you to a unit, okay? Once that happens, the screen's going to come up for me as the career manager, and it's going to tell me, did I consider those things we just talked about. Did I consider your previous assignments? I have to click yes. Did I consider your overseas? Yes. Did I consider EF&P? Did I consider MACP? And it may not apply, but I still have to put yes or no to all those. Okay, if any of those come back red, that means it's a mismatch. So Ames is just trying to take a couple different systems that we do and kind of, combine it into one. So if it's a mismatch, that doesn't mean always that it's a no. One second, sir. It doesn't mean always that it's a no. It means that it takes some type of additional coordination, and response. Because there's reasons it could be a mismatch, right? Because you can have an EF&P that traditionally, in general, EF&P family doesn't go to, but in your particular circumstance, I could put in for that waiver and send it up, to the folks upstairs and do the justification of why I think you can go there, and we can work those. So that's kind of the overview of how it works. And then the RFO, which used to be a separate TOPMIS function, which up until I think is March, right? We could still do in TOPMIS. They want to take the RFO function out of TOPMIS and move it. So we do it out of what they call the toolkit, which is linked to Ames. So we're doing it in one system. So ultimately, we'll be able to do from start to finish the assignment process to include the workflow, MACP, EF&P, all in one system. So that.
Okay, we do have to end the session now. There's about 9 minutes left for this break before the next sessions. But Colonel Kofi and Brad will be available out in the area there.